or powder coating. Turn this into not this with powder on it. Quote is I'm not old, I'm just dumb.
You're gonna take the put a rap down. At least say to them you're gonna park up, innit? So why don't you shut up, man? And just put a rap down for the people, innit? Shut up, man.
Yeah. Anyway, in essence, there are 3 steps to powder coating. It's very similar to paint. The first is to prep whatever surface you're going to be covering in powder. The second is the actual coating, and the third is baking it in the oven. I've been using powders that get baked at about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is close to 200 degrees Celsius if I'm not mistaken. The most important step, just like painting, is to make sure that you prep the surface and all related areas on the actual object. So for this, I would just sand it down, then use some finer grit, and I typically hit it with steel wool just to clean off any residue, and once all that's taken care of, I wipe it down with a clean rag and maybe even a little bit of cleaner to get all that dust away, because you don't want to seal that in. One alternative to prepping it with sandpaper and doing a bunch of manual labor would be media blasting or sand blasting. If you have a little cabinet, you can buy one of those for I don't know how much and hook it up to your air compressor. I just don't have the space for one, so whatever. I also don't powder coat that often, but for little stuff like this, as long as it can fit in your oven, you can do this at home. Once everything's prepped and ready, you want to go ahead and set up the powder coating station. So with the piece of metal, you'll need some kind of metallic hook that carries current. That's going to get hooked up to a ground wire that traces back to the powder coating machine. And the one that I'm using is from Harbor Freight. Pretty simple system. It has a ground, an activation pedal, and the actual powder coating nozzle. The way that the nozzle works is by hooking up to a constant 20 psi supply of air pressure. So I'm using an air compressor with a regulator on it from Lowe's, and that's hooked into the nozzle, which will then spray the powder onto the object, just like that. So when I press the pedal, you should hear the powder coating machine come on, and on this model there's a little green light that shows up on the machine. And as I get closer with the end of the nozzle, you'll start to hear that sound. That's what you want to hear before you start spraying any of the powder, and that ensures that electricity is flowing between the end of the nozzle and the actual object you're powder coating. You don't want it to spark like that, to arc like that, as that'll create imperfections in the powder coat. But once you're ready, just give it nice little blasts. And if you get a little too much, I tend to just scrape some of it off. And if you're curious about what those parts are for that I'm coating, some of you might already know, but the rear trailing arms, where they bolt up to the frame, are pretty famous for taking heavy hits. So those pieces of armor will go on both sides to reinforce that section. That's what those pieces are for. And of course I've got the adjustable Iron Man trailing arms. I've got a pretty pun here, kick-ass video coming out for you guys sooner or later. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. And that'll be just around the corner. The bake is done. I'll let them cool off. You can tell right there, there's a little bit of that hump, and that's just from that uneven application of the powder. But if you do a better job than I did, then you'll end up with glassy smooth. And for these, it really doesn't matter because these are going to be underneath the truck being hit by rocks every other second, so not really a big deal there. But those are the basics of powder coating. Not a lot to it.
Easy, easy. You're good, you're good. Yeah. Stay left, stay left. Back it up and bump it, baby.